was fourth form and above. But I sort of knew that what I was looking for wasn't going to be in there. And I went in there and I found Aristotle on tragedy. And I learned it. Tragedy then is the imitation of an action, complete and of some importance, acted, not narrated, in language enhanced by distinct and varying means, and through pity and fear, effecting its purgation of these emotions. What I had experienced was, through pity and fear, effecting its expurgation of these emotions. I'm still trying to work out what most of the rest means, as anyone who is interested in tragedy must do, but it's a great start. So I knew instantly that my destiny was to be the greatest dramatic writer that there had ever been. The plan was that I was quite a good amateur actor. You know, I went into school plays and played parts that you can't play anymore at school. I played Othello. I played Ulysses in Troilus and Cressida. I played Volpone. I think I did, what else did I do? I did Timon and one or two other things, all in front of an audience. The great thing about Shakespeare is that he gave me the language to express my inarticulated adolescent rage. I went to East Anglia intending to be a writer, having failed to get into Cambridge, as my daughter pointed out to me the other day. Daddy, I've decided I'm not going to go to Harvard, I'm going to go to Cambridge and study law. Why law? Because I want to be very rich. Well, that may be your first mistake. But why Cambridge? Because I read somewhere that you failed to get into Cambridge because you were drunk at the interview of King's. What a little bitch, eh? Anyway, so I went to the University of East Anglia and founded, we were a new university, there were 105 of us. So I founded the Dramatic Society, and every political party, everyone, well, trying to get a bit debate going, you know, and it was the 60s. Yes, we were all very stupid in those days, but perhaps I still am, actually, now that I think about it. And I met a linguistic philosopher, a man called Marcus Dick. Marcus Dick had had a brilliant war. He'd been a tank commander in North Africa and had a really successful war. He'd already got a first at Cambridge in philosophy. He goes back to Cambridge, he gets a star at first in mathematical philosophy. He goes, I think, to Harvard or Yale, gets an additional degree, automatically comes back to Cambridge, Oxford rather, and gets elected to a fellowship at Balliol College. Very high, very, very highbrow. And then he runs into a problem. There was a period of philosophy in the 60s, the 50s and 60s called logical positivism, which came out of the Vienna School. But linguistic philosophy really became the cutting point of philosophical discourse. The problem is that almost everything we say has no meaning. Logically, we are not very good at really communicating exactly the thought. And that hit Marcus. There was a lovely line in a book called The Fly and the Fly Bottle, Encounters with English Intellectuals, by a man called Ved Mehta, in which he said, he was talking about a man called J.L. Austin, who was a linguistic philosopher. Austin had had published a little book called How to Do Things with Words. Do not be taken in by the simplicity of that. And Vedmeta said, while Austin was alive, many of the younger Oxford philosophers could not write because every time they wrote a paragraph, they heard J.L. Austin's dry voice taking it apart, sentence by sentence. And that had crippled him. He was an unhappy man, and he came to a new university to sort of start again. He still had a tremendous, strong, analytical mind. And he was a damn good teacher. But the problem was, if you don't really worry about these things, you know, you just take it as you can write it in the book and forget about it. What worried me was I saw the problem, how difficult it is to actually articulate something meaningfully. And I don't have the brain power to be able to find an answer around that. And it really struck me down for at least a year, and a bit longer. But I shied away from that and went into, I did more acting. And then I graduated and I taught in a little local school for 2 terms, and then I got a scholarship to RADA and left RADA Sunday night and started work. But I was intending to be a writer, and I still write. What do I do when I'm at home? Well, just to annoy every woman I've ever known, I always say, look, I am an actor. I can do anything. And in truth, in my lifetime, I've tried to do everything. You know, I've repointed brickwork on houses that I've had. You know, I could plumb. I can use a mill and a lathe and I used to use spanners as well. But you know, there's the broken arm with the screws in it there, and I don't quite lift things. My wife and I bought a little property in New Zealand. It was completely run down, and she said, "Oh, it's going to cost an awful lot of money to do." And I said, "Oh, no, nonsense! Come on, it's 9 meters by 10 meters, single story. Yes, I may need a bit of help with the roof, but I reckon I can get through this in about 3 months." Guess what? I'm no longer capable of climbing on a table with an 8x4 plasterboard and using the nail gun or the screw gun to do things like that. It gets you I don't know what happened. I seem to have moved from about 35 to 95 in about 2 minutes. I blame my sons. I'm only 28 years old, and look at me. Anyway, but right at the moment, I'm building a film studio. I've been trying to do this for 30 years, but now is the time, because as I approach my 80th year, I better get a move on. I've got some great stories that I want to make my way. And as soon as the studio is up and running, I'm going to go out and try and shake the money tree to get the money to make it. What sort of stories? Well, they're about the human spirit. We are the most privileged humans ever to walk the earth. I don't care what your problems are, what my problems are. We are the most fortunate people. If you look at our ancestors, up until the end of the Stone Age, you'll find some male skeletons in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and even occasionally 60s. Mind you, they're pretty damaged and crippled with arthritis and other things, breakages. But look at the female skeletons. You'll find girls in their teens, their early 20s. You almost never find a pre-end of Stone Age woman over the age of 30. The life expectancy of a woman up until the end of the Stone Age is 21 years, approximately. Why? Because we had an ice age. And at the start of the ice age, there were at least 5 other species of hominids, 4 or 5 at least. Floriensis, the hobbit, Neanderthal, Denisova, and Heidelbergensis. I think Heidelbergensis is still around at that time. And there's a trace in some Pacific island history of another hominid that we've never found any fossils of. There were 5 of us 100,000 years ago, 5 or 6 cousins that we had. By the end of the Ice Age, there's only us. Why? Because 1 or 2 of our ancestors were a little bit more observant than anybody else. And they could correlate that season with that plant and that insect, which meant there were birds there or bees there, and that meant we could get a bit of honeycomb. And with that, we have just enough nutrition to live long enough to sire children. We selected for intelligence. When you select for intelligence, you select for a bigger brain. When you select for a bigger brain, you select for a bigger skull. The bigger skull has to pass through a birth passage. A birth passage that has evolved only to take a skull, a baby skull of a certain size. And what happens is, of course, the women and children who can't make that birth happen die. We are the descendants of teenage girls who struggled in the most appalling circumstances and died giving birth to a baby that their sisters or other people tried to look after. They did whatever they could to make sure that that child lives. And because that child lives, you and I are here. And we have lost contact with that reality and that certainty. You know, we are here because they willed it to happen. They looked at us and saw us doing better than them, as your father and your mother all looked at you and wanted you to do better. You know, and there we are with our first world troubles, you know. I'm not as happy as I should be. You know, just remember where we came from and what the hope was for us. And do not betray that hope. You know, when they were living in caves, they knew that one day you would be living in better circumstances. When they were starving, they knew that you would be smart enough to make sure that you got fed, and your children would do better too. By the way, there is a belief that, in fact, human intelligence is in decline. That really, human intelligence peaks about 22,000 years ago. And that it really is the advent of farming, around about 14,000 years ago, that begins our slow unraveling of intelligence. Because, of course, if you weren't effective as a hunter and as a provider, as part of the group, you died. You did not live long enough to reproduce. Evolution removed you. And now, of course, Everyone survives. Every baby survives. You do not have to have the responsibility of bringing up your own children. The state will do that for you. We are, don't get me wrong, I do believe in good medicine and the careful care of children. But we are, like it or not, we are becoming dumber with each generation. That is not a popular view, and it's probably going to be held up as an example of my right-wing radicalist or whatever it is. But it is actually a view that is shared by a number of academics as well. So one of the themes that I would want to talk about is to celebrate the lives of those who really came before us and had the courage of doing whatever it takes so that this child will survive. And I think I think they would be proud of us and puzzled by us. Somebody did say the other day that if an ancient Greek turned up in modern society, he would look around and say, wow, the telephone, oh, wow, the mobile phone, and you do fly to space. Extraordinary, wonderful, wonderful. Why did it take you so long?